All right, guys, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to learn a little bit more about what is MVC and create our first controller to help us organize our application code a little bit better. So now I didn't mention this previously, but Laravel is built on top of a design pattern or architectural pattern called MVC. And it stands for Model View Controller. And in simple terms, basically, we divide our code into three separate parts: models, views, and controllers. And so far, you have worked with views, right? So we had our views and our blade files, right? So that's going to be the view section of MVC. We already are familiar with that. So basically, we put all our HTML and CSS in views. But we also have two other parts. Now, the first one is controllers, which is the highest level. And the job of the controller is basically to interact with models and views and dictate the flow of our application. So if you have a request on the feed page, the controller's job is to go ahead and say, hey, we need to load all the ideas or tweets on the application. We need to go ahead and get the HTML and all that, and then we need to pass that back to the user. So the controller basically manages what needs to do, or as the name suggests, controls what needs to happen. And we will learn more about that once we actually do it in code. So far, it's just theory. And the job of the model is basically to interact with database or data, whatever kind of data we have. We might have files instead of database, right? So its job is to interact with database, get all the information from database. If you have users, you may have a user model. The job of the user model is to get all the users from database and return them back to the controller. All right, so that was just a quick overview. We will learn more about that as we go on throughout the course. So don't worry about it if you don't understand it fully yet. So now that we have learned that, let's see why actually we need to create our first controller, right? So far we've been defining our routes here, right? What if you want to do some complicated logic here, right? Maybe we want to get something from the database. We need to do some some sort of logic on the data, and then we want to render it, right? So we're going to make this web.php file very kind of crowded. It's going to have lots of lines of code. So what we're going to do from now on is, instead of actually returning the view here inside our route file, we're going to actually send it to a controller and let our controller decide what to do for that request, right? So I'm going to actually go ahead and delete these guys, these two routes. We no longer need them. And I'm going to also delete our user view and feed.view, which we had on the previous episode. And I'm also going to actually go ahead and delete this part of this function part, which is a disclosure. All right, so for now, I'm going to delete it. Obviously, our code will no longer work. We now need to go and create our first controller. So if you go on the app, if you remember from episode 3, inside the app folder, HTTP, we have a folder called controllers. So this is where our controllers are supposed to go. Now, Laravel has a base controller, which we can extend. We're not going to touch this for now. And we can go ahead and actually create a new file and, for example, create a dashboard controller. And we can name it PHP. Now, the convention generally is to, for example, have it be singular. So it's going to have dashboard. If you had users, it would be user controller. And then followed by the controller to make it a bit easier, because we're going to have user model, user controller, user factory. So it's going to be a bunch of files with similar names. So I'm going to actually add controller to the end, so it's easier to search for this file, and you can create the file. Now inside here we need to write a bunch of code, and because it's going to be hard to memorize and I don't want you guys to memorize them, we're actually going to use a way to automate this process. So I'm going to actually go and delete this. I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm going to create a new tab. So you can do that on your side. For me, I'm going to actually use a terminal inside VS Code. But if you are not using VS Code, you can open up your own terminal. So, and inside here, I'm going to run the following command. You can just type it in: PHP artisan. Now, artisan is a tool that comes with Laravel. It allows us to do some automated tasks, right? We already have used PHP artisan serve to create our web server. But I'm going to call PHP artisan make controller. So we are telling Laravel to create a controller for us, and I'm going to call it dashboard controller, right? So you basically need to tell it the name of your controller at the end and hit enter. Now Laravel will go ahead and, you remember, it's going to create a dashboard.controller file for us. Basically the same file we created, but except we don't actually need to write the PHP for it. So it's going to basically make it automatic. And yeah, you're going to have to do this for every single controller you do. So instead of typing it yourself, just write this command, php artisan make controller, and then name of your controller, right? So name here. And that's what you have to do. All right, perfect. So now that we have created our controller, you can see it's basically a simple class. It already has the namespace we need, and it extends this controller file here that comes with Laravel, right? You can type this yourself, but we already have done it. So inside here, I'm going to actually create a function, and I'm going to call it index. And inside here, I'm going to actually do what we used to do on our route. So actually, as you can see on our route, what did we do? We said return welcome view. So I'm just going to actually put that inside our function, exactly same as what we had on our route. All right, so I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to type the following. I'm going to open a list or an array, and I'm going to type in dashboard controller class, comma, and then I'm going to type in index. So with this new code that we have written, we are telling, and I'm going to remove this so it's a bit less crowded. So you need to make sure you import dashboard controller. VS Code does that automatically for me. Basically, we are telling Laravel, whenever you get a request for this URL, which is the root URL, pass it to the index function or the index method inside dashboard controller. And this is how you tell Laravel, right? So if you had a different controller, you would write the name here, dash class, and then the function you want to pass in. So inside, if, for example, we had another function and we named it profile, the way you would distinguish between these two is here, right? So if I wanted the profile method to handle this, I would type in profile. But for now, I want to use the index. Now, why did I call it index? This is a convention inside the Laravel community. Whenever you're processing something inside the basically the root folder, and later on, once we work with models, we generally name it index. So that's going to be the kind of the naming scheme or convention. But you can use whatever name you like. It doesn't have to be index. That's just the name I like. All right, I'm just going to save our controller. I'm going to save our route. And I'm going to go back to the root URL. And you can see it looks exactly like it did on the first page. So in terms of functionality, it's exactly like before, but the code is a bit more organized. And we're free to do whatever we want inside this, you know, some logic inside this dashboard controller. So it makes our code a bit more organized, and we can, you know, interact with the database. We can do whatever we want inside this dashboard controller. So actually, let's do one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another route. I'm going to recreate our profile route, and I'm going to name it profile. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to create another controller. So I'm going to run php artisan make controller. I'm going to name it profile controller. And I hope I don't have a typo. So I'm going to do that. And inside the profile controller, I'm going to actually copy the same thing we have here inside dashboard controller. Like this. And instead of actually returning the welcome view, I'm going to create a new view. I know I deleted it early on, but I'm going to create a new view. And I'm going to put a profile h1 tag. So, and I'm going to basically return our profile view. So what I have done is create a new route / profile, have it be handled by the profile controller, and pass it to the index method. So basically we created a new route / profile. We have our profile controller, and we are passing it to the profile view, which we just created. So I'll close this so it's a bit, you have more space. I'll go back here, and I go back to /profile, and you can see it is gonna work just like it did before, except our code is a bit more organized and it allows us to do more stuff as we go on. And again, in your application, you may have 50 routes. So having the logic inside here is gonna make it very cluttered. So controllers allows us to basically organize our code better than we did previously. So that's it, guys. We have created our first controller. Our code works exactly like it did before. It's just more organized. I gave you guys an overview of MVC. We will learn more as we go along. You don't need to have a full mastery over it, but you can go ahead and maybe watch some other videos on YouTube about what is MVC, learn more about it. It's gonna be definitely beneficial. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And let me know what else you want to learn. See you guys on the next episode. Bye.